Could we get a reporter or speaker from the group next door that was talking about recruiting and supporting students from underrepresented groups, from minority serving institutions, and through minority science organizations?
Great. Hi, everyone. So we were next door. We were the group on recruiting diverse students from minority-serving institutions, minority-serving organizations, and how to support them once you get them in the REU. We started with a small icebreaker, which was we actually listed a number of societies that we talked about earlier and asked everyone how many had been. We actually saw quite a few people have been to SACNA. A few of the other ones, it's a little more scattered. So in general, it looks like there's actually like a place where we're all going, but maybe not coordinating with each other. So there's probably an opportunity at a place like SACNA to do some better coordination and really sort of think about how we're recruiting students. And there's other societies where we're just not going at all. I mean, we heard about a couple of societies this morning. There was like maybe 1 or 2 hashes next to those. So there's some places where we just don't have any presence yet. So obviously there's some work to do. What we did, though, is we broke it down into 3 basic questions for the group that we talked about for an hour. One was, what are your goals for your REU? Like, what are your specific goals? What are the challenges you've been facing in trying to meet those goals? And then what are some sort of strategies people have taken to deal with the challenges they've been facing in meeting their goals? What we're seeing, there were some real common threads. A number of threads were, one, people want different applicants, not just diverse applicant pools, but different applicants applying to their pools. And so that was a very common thread in there. And we could also think about the way we think about our goals. People were talking about short and long-term goals. The short-term goals were really focused on getting different students into your group, but the long-term goal was producing people who look different than what's currently in the geosciences. In other words, creating mentors for the future generation. So that popped up quite a bit. So there were quite a few, the short and the long-term goals in there. Challenges were all over the place, but we had some really common ones. I mean, the main one was just getting students to apply. That popped up throughout. How do I get students from HBCUs, HSIs, tribal colleges to apply? Some of the comments I heard were people were sending emails out and never hearing back. Someone made the comment that they're at the Smithsonian and never get applicants from Howard, and and that was like, why is that happening? And that's a real challenge in trying to get students on there. So this was a very common one, those challenges. And the support mechanisms, we talked about what are the challenges supporting those students. If you do get them in, what's happening? And what's happening, one of the things we heard is sometimes the mentors are a little hesitant to take a community college student or a student that might not, they might be used to having a postdoc all the time. So that represents a different challenge. How do you get mentors that are really engaged with and committed to mentoring an undergraduate who might not have all the skills of a postdoc? So that was another thing that we ran into. And then we talked about a lot of different, issues. I think I walked in hearing about the essay that popped up. And so, we heard some strategies about that essay can be a bit of a challenge. And so thinking about how you structure your questions was one. We talked about, having to make personal contacts. If you're trying to work, with HBCUs or tribal colleges, they're probably getting inundated with emails. And so you really need to have some personal connections that are out there. So this was a real brief summary of there, but there was quite a bit more. But these were some of the larger themes that started to pop up in the overall session.
So I just had a question about non-traditional students, so who are older, who are married, who have families. Have people dealt with that issue? Because I know my university doesn't allow in the dorms for a spouse to live with, so it's hard to have that person. So anyway, I would appreciate any input of people who've dealt with this.
Oh, okay. I know Samaya wants to say something too. So yes, I put most of my students in traditional campus housing, but we do have family options. It costs more to my program, but I can house them. So far, they've chosen to do something different. One chose to live at home and drive into Norman, and so I gave her housing allowance to her as a compensation for the gas that she was going to be spending. She had good enough family support she could deal with, and friend support that she could deal with her child issues, but there were a few days that she missed some program activities and coming to work because of having family burden.
Yeah, we've also had a couple of students that had either grandparents or families or children that were that they had to take care of during the summer. So for those students that were able to, they took their housing allowance and lived off campus. and that was okay. I mean, because I think it didn't really make much of a difference in actually in the cohort because the students also work together in the same lab. They sit together, they do other activities during the day together, they go to lunch together. So in the end, really didn't make much of a difference in the cohort. Those people were also included. But they did take their housing allowance and live off campus, and that was perfectly fine.
We have a very college-focused town in Pullman, Washington, and a lot of the students leave for the summer and they're stuck in a 12-month lease. So we actually were able to find housing for a mother and 2 children in just a random house on near campus. It took a lot of legwork for the PI and others to find housing for them. So we encourage people to start early because the students are lining up sublease or sub-renters well before the summer starts, and so that was hard. The other thing I suggest is tap into your graduate school or other entities on campus because they might be able to pull some strings also. We have a heritage house on our campus, and that has been proposed as another option for summer housing for a Native student at the heritage house, which I wouldn't be able to pull those strings, but someone from the grad school could.
You might even look at your state regents. I don't think that's on, but our state regents will support women in science, or at least they were. They mentioned that to me at an event once, and fine.
And also, is this on? Keep in mind that if you have a special situation that's very unusual, we will consider supplements to help out with costs that, if you've got a disabled student who needs special housing or any of these kind of issues that come up, we can supplement the budget sometimes.
For mentioning that, I did that once with disability services for a deaf student. And I was really grateful that NSF said, sure, how much do you need? Then I had to try to figure out a budget when I'd never done it before. But
Yeah, and I'd recommend, especially since many of our programs are at a major institution, contacting your university housing and dining program. Many universities offer family student housing. As a person who was a graduate student with kids, they're really supportive. They're really set up to support families to spend, and especially in the summer, they're usually empty, or at least half empty. And so you can usually set up a contract with those offices at your institution.
If you have never run an REU before and you're about to, I think the first thing that you need to do is actually contact the housing office, the very first thing, and reserve space for your students next summer. Do it now or, next week.